Imagine standing in a frozen forest more than 1,000 years ago. All around you are endless rivers, huge open plains, and thick woods. There are no cities, no trains, no Kremlin, and no Russia as we know it today. Just small tribes living across one of the biggest land areas on Earth. A country that would survive Mongol invasions, overthrow emperors, defeat Napoleon, crush Nazi Germany, send the first human into space, and become a superpower. This is the story of Russia. It is a story full of warriors, emperors, revolutionaries, dictators, explorers, and dreamers. It is a story of victory and pain. Our story begins in the 9th century. At that time, Eastern Europe was home to many Slavic tribes. These people farmed, hunted in the forests, and traded along rivers that connected Northern Europe to the Byzantine Empire. These rivers became travel routes for Scandinavian traders and warriors known as the Varangians. You can think of them as Viking traders. They were not just traders, many of them wanted to make money through trade. They traveled deep into Eastern Europe and built routes that linked the Baltic Sea to Constantinople. According to old stories, a Viking leader named Rurik arrived around 862 and took control of the city of Novgorod. A new state was starting to take shape. Soon, Rurik's successors moved south. The city of Kiev became the center of power, and this created what historians call Kievan Rus. This was not Russia in the modern sense, but it became the ancestor of Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. One of the biggest moments came in 988. Prince Vladimir adopted Orthodox Christianity from the Byzantine Empire. This changed everything. Religion became a strong unifying force. Byzantine culture influenced buildings, art, laws, and government. The onion domes, religious customs, and cultural identity linked to Eastern Slavic civilization all go back to this moment. For almost 2 centuries, Kievan Rus grew through trade and farming, but that good time would not last forever. In the early 13th century, a terrifying new force came from the east, the Mongols, led by the descendants of Genghis Khan. These horse-riding warriors built the largest connected empire in history. They moved incredibly fast. Cities that fought back were often destroyed. Armies that stood against them were crushed. Between 1237 and 1240, Mongol armies swept across the lands of Rus. Major cities burned, whole populations were destroyed. Kiev, once the jewel of Eastern Europe, was left in ruins. For the next 2 centuries, the Russian principalities lived under the control of what became known as the Golden Horde. Russian rulers paid tribute to Mongol leaders and accepted their power. At first, this looks like a time of defeat, but history is rarely that simple. The Mongol period deeply shaped Russia's future. Russian princes learned how to run a state, collect taxes, and build stronger central control. Most importantly, one city slowly began to grow in power: Moscow. It started as a small settlement, but its rulers became very smart political players. They worked with Mongol leaders when they had to, expanded their influence, and slowly became leaders among the Russian lands. A major change was coming. By the late 15th century, Moscow was ready to challenge Mongol rule. The key figure was Ivan III, often called Ivan the Great. He expanded Moscow's territory, strengthened central power, and reduced dependence on the Golden Horde. In 1480, a standoff along the Ugra River effectively ended Mongol control over Moscow. Russia had won back its independence, but Ivan wanted more than freedom. He saw Moscow as the heir to the Byzantine Empire. After Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks in 1453, many Russians believed Moscow had become the center of Orthodox Christianity. This led to the idea that Moscow was the third Rome. That belief gave Russian rulers a strong sense of purpose and destiny. Then came Ivan IV. He is better known as Ivan the Terrible. He became Russia's first ruler to be officially crowned as Tsar. Ivan expanded Russian land a great deal, conquering major khanates and pushing Russia farther east. But he also became known for fear, suspicion, and cruelty. His rule included political purges, executions, and widespread terror. By the time he died in 1584, Russia was bigger than ever before, but it was also unstable, and that instability soon turned into chaos. Imagine a country with no clear leader. Famine is killing people. Foreign powers are attacking. Several people are claiming the throne. That was Russia at the start of the 17th century. This period is known as the Time of Troubles, and it nearly destroyed the Russian state. A series of disasters hit at once. Bad harvests caused mass starvation. Political fights got worse. Poland and Lithuania stepped in with military force. Moscow itself fell under foreign control. For a while, it looked like Russia might disappear completely, but resistance grew. Volunteer armies pushed the foreign forces out. In 1613, a new ruler was chosen, Michael Romanov. His election began the Romanov dynasty, which would rule Russia for more than 300 years. The crisis was over, and a new chapter was beginning. If there is one ruler who changed Russia more than anyone else, it may be Peter the Great. When Peter came to power in the late 17th century, Russia was behind many Western European countries in technology, military organization, and industry. Peter wanted to fix that. Unlike many kings, he traveled across Europe himself. He studied shipbuilding, looked at factories, and learned from engineers and military experts. Then he returned home with a clear goal: modernize Russia. He reformed the army, built up the navy, supported science, and introduced new government systems. And most famously, he built a new capital city, St. Petersburg. Built near the Baltic Sea, it became Russia's window to Europe. The city showed Peter's vision, a Russia connected to the wider world. By the time Peter died in 1725, Russia had become a major European power. The change was huge, but even bigger expansion was still ahead. During the 18th and 19th centuries, Russia grew at an amazing speed. It moved into Siberia, reached the Pacific Ocean, expanded into the Caucasus, and spread across Central Asia. At its peak, the Russian Empire covered about 1/6 of the Earth's land surface. To understand how huge that was, just imagine traveling from one side of the empire to the other. It could take months. One of the most famous rulers of this time was Catherine the Great. Born in Germany, Catherine became one of Russia's most successful rulers. She expanded the empire, supported education, and made Russia stronger in Europe. During this period, Russia became a major force in world politics. Its armies helped shape the balance of power across Europe. One of the biggest moments came in 1812. Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Russia with what many believed was one of the greatest armies ever assembled. At first, the campaign seemed to be going well. Russian forces pulled back, and Moscow was left behind. But Russia's size became its greatest weapon. Distance, cold weather, lack of supplies, and these things destroyed Napoleon's army. Only a small part of it made it home. The invasion changed European history and made Russia look like a truly powerful nation. But under the empire's strength, serious problems were growing. By the late 19th century, Russia was changing fast. Factories were being built, railroads were spreading, and cities were growing. But this also created inequality. Millions of peasants were still poor, workers had hard lives, and people had very little political freedom. Anger spread. Things got worse after Russia lost the Russo-Japanese War and faced unrest in 1905. Then World War I began. The war put huge pressure on the empire. Military losses grew. The economy got weaker. Food shortages became common, and people lost faith in the government. In 1917, revolution broke out. The Romanov dynasty fell. Tsar Nicholas II gave up the throne. After more than 300 years, Imperial Russia was gone, but the fight for power had only just started. Into this chaos stepped Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks. They promised peace land, and bread, and in October 1917, they took power. Their victory shocked the world. For the first time, a government based on communist ideas controlled a major country. Then civil war began. It was brutal. The Reds fought the Whites, foreign powers got involved, and millions died from fighting, hunger, and disease. In the end, the Bolsheviks won. In 1922, the Soviet Union was officially created. A new era had begun. The USSR tried to rebuild society from the ground up. Industry was taken over by the state, farming was reorganized, and the economy was changed through central planning. This experiment would have huge effects on Russia and the rest of the world. After Lenin died, a fierce power struggle began. The winner was Joseph Stalin. Stalin quickly took full control. Under him, the Soviet Union became an industrial giant. Huge factories were built, roads, railways, and other infrastructure grew, and military power increased. But these gains came at a terrible human cost. Political purges forced labor camps, and collective farming left millions dead. Then came the biggest test of all. World War II.
Where the democracies had fired oil tanks as their armies retreated.
In 1941, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history. The Soviet Union faced disaster. Large areas were occupied, millions were killed, and cities were destroyed. But Soviet resistance was incredible. The battles of Moscow, Stalingrad, and Kursk became famous. By 1945, Soviet forces had taken Berlin. The war had cost the USSR tens of millions of lives, but victory turned the Soviet Union into a global superpower. After World War II, the world split into two rival systems. The United States stood for capitalist democracy. The Soviet Union stood for communist socialism. This rivalry became known as the Cold War. For decades, the two superpowers competed in almost every area you can think of: military strength, technology, spying, influence, and even space. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, the world's first artificial satellite. Soon after, Yuri Gagarin became the first human in space. These achievements amazed the world. For a while, many people thought the Soviet system might beat the West, but big problems were still there. The economy became less efficient. The government became stuck in keeping up its superpower. Image became very expensive. Over time, pressure for change grew. In the 1980s, Mikhail Gorbachev introduced reforms called glasnost and perestroika. The goal was to modernize the Soviet system. Instead, these reforms sped up its collapse. Long-hidden anger came out. Nationalist movements grew stronger, and economic problems got worse. In 1991, the Soviet Union broke apart. One of the most powerful states in history stopped existing. 15 independent countries were created. One of them was the Russian Federation. The Cold War was over, and a new, uncertain future had begun. The 1990s were a difficult time. Russia moved from a planned economy to a market economy. Many people suffered political instability, and economic shocks were common. By the early 2000s, the country entered a new phase. The economy started growing again. The government became stronger. Russia once again wanted a major role in world affairs. Today, Russia is still one of the most important countries on earth. It has huge natural resources, a powerful military, a rich culture, and a history unlike any other nation. Its story is still changing, shaped by the same forces that have guided it for centuries: geography, security, identity, and power. The history of Russia is really a story of survival. Survival through invasion, through revolution, through famine, through war, through collapse and rebirth. From Viking traders moving along river routes to cosmonauts traveling into space, Russia's journey covers more than 1,000 years of dramatic change. It has seen some of history's greatest achievements and some of its darkest tragedies. And whether you see it as an empire, a civilization, a superpower, superpower or a nation still searching for its place in the modern world, Russia remains one of the most fascinating stories in human history, because to understand Russia is not just to understand one country, it is to understand a major force that has helped shape world history itself.